Shawn Kemp.
This is Gary Payton.
Hey, this is Pau Gasol.
NBA fans, what's up? This is Vince Carter here.
Hey, what's up? This is Matt Barnes. If you're an old school NBA fan like I am, make sure you check out the Basketball Time Machine with my man Shawn David.
Hello and good day, everyone. Welcome back to the Basketball Time Machine. My name, of course, is Shawn David, and I welcome you to your weekly dose of old school NBA basketball. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different. I will give you my personal dream team. So basically my top 12 favorite players of all time, which is going to be super tough. And I'm 100% sure that if you will ask me the same question a year later, I will have a different team. But this is my 2023 edition. So before we start though, let me ask you guys for a small favor. Please subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the content. And I would say enough said, let's get right down into it. So let's start with my starting lineup, and the first position will raise some eyebrows by many of you, but hear me out. Now, obviously many people consider Magic Johnson to be the greatest point guard of all time, and probably rightfully so. But my favorite point guard of all time, a little lower than Magic Johnson, is John Stockton. It has a couple of reasons. Number one, I like players who are not physically gifted but still are productive in the NBA, and players who have a super high basketball IQ. And there are not many players who are smarter than John Stockton. Then the other thing that I really liked about him is he was tough at nails and he was a dirty player, if you basically ask Steve Kerr. But to me, I would not really consider him a dirty player, but more of a feisty player and a player who would do whatever it takes to win basketball games. Then also he stayed with one franchise for his entire career, hardly missed any games, and this is something that I really appreciate. I like players who stay with their franchise even though they don't play for the most popular franchise. Then another thing, he's not only the all-time leader in assists but also in steals, so this guy was just insane, and that's why he's my starting point guard. Coming in at number 2, oh, what a surprise, Michael Air Jordan. I don't want to spend too much time talking about him because you know how I feel about MJ. To me, the greatest player of all time, one of the best defenders of all time, one of the best offensive players of all time, probably in the top 3 in both categories, the clutchest player that you have ever seen, the face of the Chicago Bulls for so many years, the face of the NBA for so many years, just pure greatness. Love this guy, so obviously my number 2 pick. Then coming in at number 3, at first I had Scottie Pippen, but then I thought, hey, wait a sec. Who's my second most favorite player of all time? Larry Legend, Larry Bird. Again, basically falls into the same kind of category as John Stockton, a player who's not the most physically gifted player of all time, but made the most out of what God has given to him. Super clutch, his trash-talking stories are legendary. Then he stayed with the Boston Celtics for his entire career. He would never, ever join another team, a super team or something like that. He had one of the highest basketball IQs that you have ever seen in the NBA, and what I really liked about him, he was a hustle player. He would die for every loose ball possible, and you don't see that many times from your NBA superstars. So Larry Legend, my second most favorite player of all time, and rightfully belongs into my starting lineup. Then coming in at number 4, this will probably surprise you guys, but I love this guy so much. And as I said, we're not talking about the 12 best players of all time, but just my personal top 12, the guys that I like the most. So I have Dennis Rodman. This guy to me was not only the best rebounder of all time and one of the greatest defenders the NBA has ever seen, but I love his approach to the game and his preparation for the games. You can talk to anybody who knows Dennis, who played with him. Nobody watched as much game footage as Dennis Rodman. He analyzed his opponents like crazy. Then his antics, the way he behaved on court, motivating the crowd, getting everybody hyped, and the way how he got into his opponent's head, that guy was a genius. And to me, I was super happy that he was voted into the top 75 players of all time. I still think he's underrated. This guy could average 10 points a game or 15 points a game if he wanted to, but he definitely chose not to. If you watch carefully some of his games back in the days, he passed up for many open shots, getting a rebound underneath the basket, still kicking the ball out for an open shot for his teammate. This was the only reason why he didn't average 10 points plus. Anyway, so my favorite power forward of all time. So coming in at number 5, my favorite big of all time, Hakeem the Dream Olajuwon. Many people, when they list their top 10 players of all time, they always miss out on Hakeem Olajuwon, and to me, that's a crime. If you really carefully study the game of basketball and look how gifted this guy was, you will understand that he has to be in your top 10. So many reasons. Number one, this guy was dominant on both ends of the court, not only on offense, but also on defense. I mean, there's a reason why he's not only probably the greatest shot blocker of all time, a sensational rebounder. He could guard point guards in pick and roll situations. I mean, how many bigs could do that, especially back in the days? Who would do that? Only Hakeem Olajuwon. Then another thing, he won 2 championships with a team that was not as good as many people might believe. Obviously, if you talk to the Houston Rockets players, they feel that their team was good, and hey, I'm not saying that your team was bad, but if you compare it to other teams that won championships in the 80s and 90s, the Houston Rockets were pretty much understaffed. I mean, who was the other All-Star on the 94 Houston Rockets? Well, they didn't have any. They had players like Sam Cassell, Kenny Smith, Robert Horry, and those guys. Sensational role players, but no superstars. Most teams at least have 2 superstars on their team. And if you take a look at the Los Angeles Lakers of the 80s and the Boston Celtics of the 80s, they had multiple superstars. So to win a championship in the 1990s with Hakeem Olajuwon and the Houston Rockets, I think they should deserve a lot more credit than they actually got. Anyway, so Hakeem Olajuwon, my number 5 guy. Now let's talk about my bench. My backup point guard is going to be prime Penny Hardaway. I just love this guy so much, and I know that he only had a limited amount of years where he was really that good because of his many injuries, but I just love that guy. I always called him Magic Johnson 2.0. Not that he's better than prime Magic Johnson, but I just loved his game so much, and I think if it wasn't for his injuries, we would be talking about the top 75 players of all time. So coming in at my shooting guard, I will have Tracy McGrady. Again, basically falls into the same kind of category like a Penny Hardaway, only had a shorter time period in his career where he was dominant. But if we take a look at his potential and how good he was in his prime, I think there's no arguing that this guy was sensational. And he was a sensational defender too. Many people overlook that quality. I love players who play both ends of the floor. That's why Tracy McGrady is my number 2. And yes, Kobe Bryant is definitely better, but and I love Kobe, but I love Tracy McGrady always a little bit more. Just my personal opinion. And the next player on my list is Scottie Pippen. Obviously, Scottie needs to be in my top 12 in my personal dream team. Won 6 championships with the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan. Would also play both ends of the floor. Very much underrated in terms of people not giving him the credit that he deserves when it comes to Scottie being an NBA superstar without Michael Jordan. Don't forget the season where Jordan retired and Scottie was carrying the Chicago Bulls. Scottie was almost the MVP of that season and showed how good he really was. So Scottie, well deserved. You belong in my personal top 12 in my personal dream team. Then next on my list on the power forward position, and yes, that one will surprise you again, but I just love that guy so much, Shawn the Rain Man Kemp. Now, looking back at the 1990s, Shawn was one of the most exciting players that I've ever seen. And many people overlook that Shawn was not just that great dunker and that spectacular player, but the guy could really hoop. He had a solid mid-range game, a really good mid-range jumper. Then he was sensational when it came to shot blocking. He was a good defender. He was guarding guys like, for example, Chris Webber, Dennis Rodman, Karl Malone, Charles Barkley. So he was guarding some of the greats of all time. And he was always holding his own. And he was also guarding guys like Shaquille O'Neal, Hakeem Olajuwon, those guys, when the Sonics were playing small ball. So don't overlook Shawn Kemp on the defensive end. So Shawn, you well deserve to be on my list. And the next player on my list, and this was a tough one, but I love Shaquille O'Neal, the big fella. Obviously, Shaq has to be in my top 12. And for me personally, I think Shaq would have made it to the NBA even if he was shorter, because many people also overlook that he had great handles for his size. He had a good post game. People always say, oh, he was only so dominant because of his physical attributes. No. Shaq was also a very skilled basketball player. Had a very good baby hook, also had some moves. Just look at the move that he pulled on Michael Jordan at I think it was the 1996 All-Star game in the practice, shortly before the game. He was showing a move that was so beautiful. Just showed that he also had great footwork. Then he could also run the floor, especially in his younger days when he was playing for the Orlando Magic. So Shaq was a very skilled basketball player, and Shaq well deserved to be in my top 12. So he will be my backup to Hakeem the Dream Olajuwon. And next on my list, I wanted to have a player that can play multiple positions. And give me some Grant Hill. Grant Hill obviously falls in the same kind of category like a Penny Hardaway and a Tracy McGrady. Bad injuries, and obviously his career could have been way better if he would have stayed healthy, but still I think he had a very solid NBA career. And in his prime, we were talking about the next Michael Jordan, and obviously again it's pretty hard to put that pressure on a certain player, but Grant Hill was the next guy to be the successor, and rightfully so. And coming in at my number 12, I wanted to take a new school player, and that was really tough, but the one guy that I felt who really carries the torch with the mentality from back in the days is Giannis Antetokounmpo, the Greek freak. He's one of the few guys that I really personally trust who could handle back in the days. So guys, this is my personal top 12, my dream team. I will be super curious. Post your top 12 in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And hopefully I'll see you next time on the Basketball Time Machine.